After I won an award at work, I invited my family to celebrate, but they all refused to come, saying it was just some silly work thing. I was staring at my phone when the notification lit up. The family group chat. My heart did that stupid, hopeful flutter it always does, even though I should know better by now. Can't wait to see everyone at the ceremony on Saturday, 7 p.m. at the Grand Hall downtown. I'd sent it 3 days ago. Radio silence since then. But now my sister had finally responded. Except she hadn't responded in our family group chat. She'd responded in her chat with my mom and dad, and somehow accidentally sent it to the family group instead. Ugh, do we really have to go to her little office thing? I need you guys to come shopping with me this weekend. I'm having a crisis about what to wear to dinner with his parents next month. I read it twice. Then 3 times. Little office thing. My grandmother's response came within seconds. What ceremony is Natalie talking about? The dots appeared under my mom's name. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally. Just some work award thing. Nothing major. I watched my grandmother typing. The dots went on forever. When her message finally came through, it was in all caps. Call me right now. I didn't want to call anyone. I wanted to disappear into my couch and pretend I hadn't seen any of this. But my phone was already ringing. Tell me about this ceremony, she said. No hello, no preamble. It's nothing really, just Natalie. Her voice had that edge that meant she wasn't playing. Tell me. So I did. I told her about the floods last month, about the emergency displacement crisis, about the 72 hours I'd spent working with the city to prevent 47 families from losing their homes. I'd negotiated emergency housing protections, filed injunctions against predatory landlords trying to exploit the disaster, coordinated with 3 different aid organizations. The legal aid organization was giving me their annual humanitarian award. And your parents said it was nothing major? I felt tears burning behind my eyes. Maybe it isn't. Maybe I'm being dramatic. It's just a plaque and a dinner. Stop, she said. Stop making yourself smaller for them. I pressed my palm against my stomach, where the secret I'd been keeping for 4 months was just starting to show. Twins. I'd found out at 8 weeks, right before the floods hit. I'd been waiting for the right moment to tell everyone. Now I just felt stupid for thinking there would ever be a right moment. They do this to you, my grandmother continued, her voice shaking slightly. Your sister needs new shoes. It's a family emergency. You're being honored for saving families from homelessness. It's nothing major. She didn't mean it like that, I said. But even I didn't believe it. Yes, she did. And your parents meant it when they chose shopping over supporting you. She was quiet for a moment. I should have stopped this years ago. I thought they'd realize what they were doing. But they're doing to you exactly what your grandfather did to me. He always favored your uncle in the business. I watched him overlook me for decades, and I never said anything. Now history is repeating itself, and I'm done being quiet. My sister's next message popped up. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. But seriously, Mom, can we please go shopping? I really need you right now. I needed you too, I thought. I needed you 4 months ago when I saw 2 heartbeats on that ultrasound screen. I needed you 3 weeks ago when I worked myself to exhaustion making sure families had roofs over their heads. But I just typed, it's fine. You guys enjoy your weekend. My grandmother's response was immediate. No, it is not fine. We need to talk. I set my phone face down and pulled a blanket over my lap. Through the fabric, I could feel the small swell of my belly that nobody knew about yet. I'd been so careful to hide it, wearing loose clothes, positioning myself strategically in video calls. I'd imagined telling them in some perfect moment. Instead, I was sitting alone, crying over a group chat, wondering if I was overreacting, wondering if they'd ever really loved me, or if I'd just been the difficult daughter who didn't fit their vision, the one who chose legal aid over corporate law, who chose advocacy over money. My phone buzzed again. My uncle. Congratulations, sweetheart. We're all very proud of you. What time should we arrive? Then my cousin. Wouldn't miss it for the world. My aunt. I'm bringing my camera. This is incredible. Natalie. One by one, the extended family filled the chat with excitement and support. Everyone except my parents and my sister, who'd gone silent. I pulled the blanket tighter and closed my eyes, my hands resting on the secret I was carrying. These babies would never doubt their worth, I promised myself. They would never wonder if they were loved. They would never feel like they had to earn basic respect, even if that meant protecting them from my own parents. The thing about being the disappointing daughter is that you can pinpoint exactly when it started. For me, it was the 6th grade science fair when I won first place with a project on water purification systems for developing countries. My mom had smiled tightly and said, "That's nice, sweetie. then spent the car ride home talking about my sister's upcoming dance recital. My sister was 8 then, all tutus and pirouettes, everything my mother had wanted me to be. Feminine, graceful, socially effortless. I was the one who showed up to family parties with a book, who'd rather debate Supreme Court cases than gossip about boys, who made my father uncomfortable because I asked too many questions about his corporate law practice. "Why do you only represent big companies?" I'd asked him once when I was 13. "What about people who can't afford lawyers?" He'd laughed and ruffled my hair like I was adorable and naive. "That's not real law, Natalie. That's activism. There's no future in that." I proved him wrong by getting into law school a year early, by graduating top of my class, by turning down every corporate offer to work in legal aid. He still hasn't forgiven me for it. My mother's disappointment ran deeper, though, rooted in something I could never control. She'd been a model in her 20s, the kind of beautiful that made people stop and stare. She'd given it up when she got pregnant with me, and I think part of her never stopped resenting that sacrifice, especially because I looked nothing like her. I got my father's practical features, his sturdy build, his serious eyes. My sister got my mother's delicate bone structure, her luminous skin, her effortless charm. By the time my sister was 16, my mother was living vicariously through her, planning her wardrobe, coaching her on how to pose for photos, pushing her toward the social success she'd never quite achieved herself. "Your sister needs guidance," she'd tell me whenever I complained about the attention disparity. "You've always been so independent. She needs us more." But independence wasn't a choice. It was survival. When you realize your parents don't quite see you, don't quite understand you, don't quite approve of the person you're becoming, you either crumble or you build yourself into something that doesn't need their validation. I chose the latter. Or maybe it chose me. My grandmother had watched this play out from the sidelines. She'd call me sometimes just to talk, to ask about my cases, to actually listen when I explained the complexities of tenant rights law. It wasn't until yesterday's phone call that I understood why. "Your grandfather built that business from nothing," she'd told me after we hung up with my parents. "And when your uncle turned 18, he started bringing him to meetings, teaching him everything. I'd been working in that office since before your uncle was born. But suddenly I was just the wife who answered phones. When your father was born, I thought maybe... But no. The oldest son got everything. I got to watch." "Why didn't you say something?" I'd asked. "Because I thought that was just how things were. And by the time I realized it wasn't, the pattern was set. I watched your father grow up seeing women as secondary, and then he married your mother, and she was so beautiful, so perfect for his image. But she'd given up her career. And I think she resented you for inheriting his features instead of hers, for being brilliant instead of beautiful, for not being the daughter she could live through." I'd cried on the phone then, finally hearing someone acknowledge what I'd always felt but never wanted to believe. "And your sister," my grandmother had continued softly. "She knows she's the favorite. She's always known. But favorites are prisoners too. Natalie. She's terrified of losing their approval, of having to stand on her own. Everything she does is about maintaining that position. She can't afford for you to be celebrated because it threatens the only identity she has." Now, sitting in my apartment, I thought about my sister's panic attack last year when our parents suggested she get a job. She'd been 26, living at home, funded by their credit card. The thought of independence had sent her into a spiral that lasted weeks. They'd backed off, called her sensitive, said she needed more time. When I'd moved out at 22, they'd barely helped me pack. My phone buzzed. My grandmother. "I'm coming over tomorrow. We need to talk about Saturday and about those babies you're carrying." "Yes, I figured it out. A great grandmother knows." I smiled despite everything, my hand moving to my stomach. At least someone was paying attention. I didn't sleep that night. Or the next one. I kept replaying the group chat message in my head, dissecting every word, wondering if I was making too much of it. Maybe they really did have plans. Maybe my sister genuinely needed support. Maybe I was being selfish, expecting them to drop everything for me. At 3 in the morning on Thursday, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Christmas mornings where my sister got 3 times as many presents. My high school graduation where they'd left early for her volleyball game. My law school acceptance party that got canceled because she had a bad breakup and needed them. But there were good memories too. My dad teaching me to ride a bike. My mom braiding my hair before picture day. Family dinners where we all laughed together. Those moments felt real, didn't they? The pregnancy hormones weren't helping. Everything felt amplified, raw. I'd cry over commercials, then cry because I was crying. My therapist had warned me that the second trimester would bring emotional intensity. But I hadn't expected this constant war between hurt and guilt. Because I did feel guilty. The extended family was in the group chat now, calling out my parents, demanding explanations. My aunt had posted something cryptic on social media about showing up for the people who matter. My uncle had apparently called my father directly. The whole family knew, and I felt responsible for the chaos. "You're causing drama," my sister had texted me privately. "Can't you just let it go? They're going through a lot right now." "What are they going through?" I'd asked. "Just stuff. You wouldn't understand." That was her favorite phrase. You wouldn't understand. As if my feelings were somehow less valid than hers, my struggles less real. But what if she was right? What if I was being overdramatic? What if the hormones were making me blow this out of proportion? It was just one event. They'd been there for plenty of other things. Hadn't they? I tried to remember. My college graduation, they'd come, but left right after the ceremony for my sister's birthday dinner. My first big case win. My dad had said, "Good for you," and changed the subject. The time I was hospitalized with pneumonia. They'd visited once, briefly, because my sister had a date she was nervous about. My grandmother showed up Friday afternoon with homemade soup and the kind of no-nonsense energy that made me feel like I could breathe again. "You look terrible," she said, setting the soup on my kitchen counter. "Thanks." "I mean it. You're not sleeping. You're second-guessing yourself." She sat down at my small dining table and gestured for me to join her. "Tell me what you're thinking." So I did. I told her everything. The guilt, the confusion, the fear that I was being vindictive instead of just hurt, the worry that I was manufacturing drama, that I was being ungrateful, that I was the problem. "And what if my babies end up being just like me?" I said, my voice cracking. "What if they're serious and bookish and not what my parents want? What if I have to watch my children go through what I went through?" My grandmother reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was paper thin, spotted with age, but her grip was firm. "Then you protect them," she said. "That's what I should have done for you. I should have said something when you were young, when the pattern was just starting. Instead, I told myself it would get better, that your parents would realize what they were doing. I was wrong. But what if I'm wrong about them? What if they love me and I just can't see it? Love isn't just a feeling, Natalie. It's action. It's showing up. It's choosing someone even when it's inconvenient." She squeezed my hand. "Do you know what your mother said to me when I called her yesterday? She said you were always so capable, so independent, that you didn't need them the way your sister did. As if needing less attention meant deserving less love." I felt tears sliding down my face. I tried so hard to be what they wanted. "No, sweetheart. You tried so hard to be good enough for them to love. But that's not how it works. You were always enough. They're the ones who failed to see it." We sat in silence for a while, my grandmother's hand warm in mine. Outside my window, the city moved on. People living their lives, unaware of my small crisis, my breaking family, my uncertain future. "Tomorrow," my grandmother said finally, "you're going to walk into that ceremony with your head high. You're going to accept that award for the incredible work you did. And you're going to let yourself feel proud, not guilty, not conflicted." Proud? I nodded, but I wasn't sure I believed it yet. The floods had started on a Tuesday. I'd been working late at the office when my phone lit up with emergency alerts, and within an hour, the city's low-income neighborhoods were underwater. I'd driven through rising water to get to the community center, where families were already gathering with whatever they'd managed to grab. I was 12 weeks pregnant then, though nobody knew. The nausea had been brutal for weeks, but I'd gotten good at hiding it. At keeping crackers in my desk drawer, at timing my bathroom breaks, at pressing my hand to my stomach when no one was looking and whispering promises to the tiny lives growing inside me. The first night, I'd worked until 4 a.m, coordinating with the city's emergency services, calling every contact I had in housing advocacy, filing emergency motions to prevent landlords from evicting displaced tenants. I'd thrown up twice in the bathroom, once from morning sickness and once from exhaustion, then gone back to making phone calls. By Wednesday afternoon, I'd identified 47 families at immediate risk. Their buildings were damaged, insurance companies were already denying claims, and landlords were circling like vultures with eviction notices. These weren't just statistics. They were people. A grandmother with 3 grandchildren, a single father with a newborn, a family who'd just started to rebuild after the last disaster. I'd sat in a folding chair at the shelter, my laptop balanced on my knees, drafting injunctions while pregnant women around me tried to soothe crying babies. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was pregnant too, but I couldn't stop to rest. If I stopped, These families would lose everything. Thursday, the nausea got worse. I'd been standing in front of a judge arguing for emergency housing protections when the courtroom started spinning. I'd gripped the podium, forced myself to focus, made my case. The judge granted the injunction. I'd made it to the bathroom before collapsing. One of my colleagues had found me there 20 minutes later, sitting on the floor with my head between my knees, trying not to pass out. "Are you sick?" she'd asked. "You need to go home." "I can't. The housing authority meeting is in an hour." These families, "Natalie, you're going to kill yourself." I'd almost laughed. I was growing 2 humans while trying to save 47 families from homelessness. Kill myself seemed like an understatement. Friday had been the worst. The building inspectors were finishing their assessments, and I'd spent the day running between 3 different locations, carrying boxes of legal documents because the power was out, and I couldn't print anything. My back ached. My feet were swollen. I'd been wearing the same clothes for 3 days. I'd been climbing stairs to reach a housing authority office on the 4th floor when it happened. The cramping started suddenly, sharp and terrifying. I'd dropped the box of documents, papers scattering down the stairs, and pressed both hands to my stomach. Not now. Please, not now. I'd sat down on the stairs, breathing through the pain, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't lose them. Not after everything. Not when families were depending on me. Not when I'd already imagined their faces, their personalities, their futures. The cramping had lasted 15 minutes. 15 minutes of me sitting alone in a dark stairwell, praying to anyone who might be listening. When it finally stopped, I'd gathered the papers, climbed the stairs, and finished the meeting. Later, in the emergency room, the doctor had looked at me with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You're pregnant with twins," she'd said, pointing at the ultrasound screen. "And you've been doing what?" "Working. There was an emergency." "You are the emergency. Your blood pressure is through the roof. You're dehydrated. You're showing signs of extreme stress." She'd leaned forward. "If you keep this up, you could lose them. Do you understand?" I'd understood. But I'd also understood that 47 families were counting on me, and I was the only one who could help them. So I'd gone back to work. By Saturday, when the last family was safely housed with legal protections in place, I'd worked 102 hours in 5 days. I'd lost 8 pounds. I'd had 3 more false alarm cramping episodes. But everyone was safe. Now, walking into tomorrow's ceremony, everyone would see the photos from that week. Me, arguing in court with dark circles under my eyes. Me, at the shelter coordinating with aid workers. Me, carrying boxes up those stairs. What they wouldn't see in the photos was that I was pregnant, that I was terrified, that I was risking everything. But my family would know, once I told them. And their absence would mean something different then. Not just missing a ceremony, but missing the recognition of what I'd sacrificed, what I'd risked, what their future grandchildren had endured because I couldn't stop fighting for people who needed help. I touched my stomach, where the twins were growing steadier now, stronger. I'd made it through. We'd all made it through. Tomorrow, I'd tell everyone. Tomorrow, the world would know what this award really meant. Saturday morning, my phone lit up at 8 a.m. "Hi, honey. We won't be able to make it tonight. Your sister really needs us right now. She's going through something difficult. I'm sure you understand. Congratulations on your award." I stared at the message for 5 minutes. The exclamation point felt like a slap. Congratulations, but not enough to actually show up. I typed and deleted 3 different responses. Finally, I just sent back a thumbs up emoji. My grandmother called immediately. "Don't you dare cancel on yourself." "I'm not. I'll be there." "Good. I'll pick you up at 6. Wear something that makes you feel powerful." I chose a navy dress that hid the small bump but fit well everywhere else. When I looked in the mirror, I almost looked like someone who had it together. The grand hall was more crowded than I'd expected. The floods had brought media attention. There were reporters with cameras, local officials, even television crews. My grandmother arrived right on time, wearing her best suit and the pearls my grandfather had given her 40 years ago. "Ready?" I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. The extended family had claimed 3 rows near the front. My aunt, uncle, cousins, even relatives I barely knew had shown up. They waved when they saw me, their faces full of genuine pride. My grandmother guided me to a seat reserved for honorees. My parents' empty seats in the family section felt like a black hole. I kept glancing at the door, hoping they'd rush in at the last minute. They didn't. At 7:15, the ceremony began. I was last, the humanitarian award that closed the evening. When my video started playing on the screens, I wasn't prepared. The organization had compiled footage from the flood week. News clips, photos from the shelter, courthouse footage. There I was, exhausted and determined, arguing for families who couldn't argue for themselves. I saw myself carrying boxes up those stairs. I saw myself at the shelter, surrounded by families I'd helped, children hugging my legs. I saw myself leaving the courthouse after the final injunction, my shoulders sagging with relief. The video ended with testimonials, a grandfather crying as he thanked me, a mother with her baby, saying I'd given them hope when they had none left. The applause was deafening. I stood up on shaky legs and walked to the podium. The director handed me a plaque, heavy and real in my hands. I looked out at my family beaming in the front rows, at the reporters with their cameras, at the crowd of people who'd come to celebrate this work. And I thought about my parents at the mall with my sister. "Thank you," I started, my voice surprisingly steady. "This award means everything to me, but it's not really about me. It's about the 47 families who trusted me to fight for them." I paused, my hand moving unconsciously to my stomach. This wasn't how I'd planned to announce it, but they'd made their choice, and I was done waiting for perfect moments that would never come. "This work nearly cost me everything," I continued. "During those 5 days, I was 12 weeks pregnant with twins. I didn't tell anyone because I knew I'd be pulled off the case, and these families needed help immediately. I risked my health and my pregnancy, and I'd do it again, because that's what justice requires sometimes. Sacrifice." The room went completely still. Then my grandmother started clapping, standing up, tears streaming down her face. My aunt and uncle jumped up beside her. Soon the entire audience was on their feet. I looked down at my phone on the podium, where notifications were flooding in. The ceremony was being live-streamed. My announcement was public, spreading across social media in real time. Someone in my extended family had posted, "So proud of our Natalie, saving families while pregnant with twins. Some people show up when it matters, some people don't." A local news account posted, "Humanitarian award recipient reveals she was pregnant during flood rescue work." And then I saw it, my sister's Instagram story, posted 20 minutes ago. A photo of her and my parents at an upscale boutique, shopping bags in hand, all smiling. Caption, "Best shopping day with my favorite people." The contrast was devastating, and it was public, viral. People were already commenting, connecting the dots, sharing screenshots between my sister's post and the live stream. I accepted congratulations from what felt like hundreds of people. My grandmother stayed close, her hand on my back, steadying me through it all. My phone exploded with messages, texts, calls, notifications, but nothing from my parents or sister. Not yet, anyway. The first call came at 10:30 that night. My father. I stared at his name on my screen for 3 rings before answering. "Natalie." His voice cracked. "We need to talk. Now you want to talk. We didn't know. About the babies. About what you went through during the floods. If we'd known, you would have what? Come to the ceremony?" I was still in my dress, the award plaque on the coffee table. "You didn't need to know about the pregnancy to show up." Silence. Then quietly, "I know." My mother's voice came through in the background, muffled but crying. Not delicate charity event tears. Raw, real crying. "Can I come over?" my father asked. "Not tonight. I need time." After I hung up, my sister called. I let it go to voicemail. Then she texted, "I'm so sorry. Please call me back." I turned my phone face down and closed my eyes. Over the next 3 days, my phone didn't stop. Messages, calls, reports from extended family about conversations they'd had with my parents. The picture that emerged was complicated, human. My mother had locked herself in her bedroom for hours after seeing the ceremony video. My aunt found her looking through old photo albums, pictures of me she'd barely glanced at in years. "I always felt like I failed her," my mother had told my aunt. "She was so smart, so capable. Nothing like me. I didn't know how to connect with her. Your sister needed me. Natalie never seemed to need anything." My aunt had been blunt. I told her that was bullshit, that you needed her just as much but learned to hide it. My father's crisis was different. My uncle said he'd broken down on the phone, admitting something he'd never said out loud. "I was jealous," he'd confessed. "My daughter is doing exactly what I told her would fail, and she's succeeding. She's making a real difference. She's who I should have been, and I've been punishing her for it." My uncle had responded simply, "So stop punishing her and start fixing it." My sister's unraveling was perhaps the most dramatic. She'd had a panic attack when she realized what her Instagram post had done. The timing, the optics, the viral comparison. She'd deleted it immediately, but screenshots lived forever. She'd called my grandmother, Sobbing, my grandmother had been less sympathetic. "You've built your entire identity on being the favorite," my grandmother had told her. "You've never had to figure out who you are because you've been too busy maintaining your position. You need to learn who you are when you're not being chosen over someone else." My sister had started therapy twice a week, diving into the realization that her dependence on our parents wasn't just financial, it was existential. She'd never developed her own sense of self because she'd been too busy being the golden child. "I don't know who I am without them telling me I'm special," she'd told my grandmother. "I don't know how to do anything on my own, and now I'm the villain in this story and I don't know how to fix it." I listened to all these reports with mixed feelings. Part of me felt vindicated. They were finally seeing what they'd done, finally feeling the consequences. But another part felt uncomfortable with their suffering. They were human. Flawed, yes, but human. My mother's texts became more frequent, more raw. "I spent so long trying to relive my youth through your sister that I forgot to see you. I forgot to ask what you needed. I'm so sorry. I saw the video of you carrying those boxes while pregnant. I should have been there helping you. I should have been your mother. I'm ashamed. I'm so ashamed of what I've done to you." My father's texts were shorter, more stilted, like he was struggling with words that didn't come naturally. "I was wrong about your work. I was wrong about you. Can we please talk? I need to explain, or try to. I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago. I should have said it every day." My sister's messages were the longest, pages of stream of consciousness apologies and self-reflection. I knew they favored me. I've always known, and I liked it, which makes me a terrible person. I was so scared of losing that favoritism that I never questioned if it was right. "I'm going to therapy. I'm trying to understand why I am the way I am. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know I'm trying to be better." I read all of it. I felt all of it. But I didn't respond. Because recognition isn't the same as change. Feeling guilty isn't the same as doing better. They were devastated now, with social pressure and public humiliation forcing them to confront their behavior. But would they still be devastated in 3 months? 6 months? When the attention faded and old patterns became comfortable again? My grandmother said it best when she came over 5 days after the ceremony. "They're hurting," she said, settling into my couch with tea. "That's real. But hurt isn't the same as transformation. Anyone can feel bad when they're caught. The question is whether they'll put in the actual work to change." My grandmother called a family meeting 2 weeks after the ceremony, not at my parents' house or mine, neutral ground, at her apartment. My parents, my sister, and me. No extended family. This was for immediate family only. I almost didn't go. But my grandmother had asked, and I couldn't say no to her. When I arrived, my parents and sister were already there, sitting on opposite ends of her couch like children called to the principal's office. My mother had lost weight. My father looked exhausted. My sister's expensive highlights were growing out. "Sit," my grandmother said to me, gesturing to an armchair. She remained standing. "I'm going to tell you all a story," she began. "And you're going to listen without interrupting." She told us about my grandfather, about working in his business from the beginning, handling books, managing clients, keeping everything running, about how my uncle turned 18 and suddenly became the heir apparent while she was relegated to administrative tasks. "I told myself it was just how things were," she said, her voice steady but hands trembling. "That's what women did then. But it wasn't about era or tradition. It was about your grandfather believing sons mattered more than wives." She looked at my father. "You grew up watching your mother be dismissed. You grew up believing that was normal. And then you had 2 daughters. And you brought those same patterns into your own family." My father opened his mouth. But my grandmother held up her hand. "I watched you do to Natalie what your father did to me," she continued. "I watched you favor one daughter over the other. And I said nothing. I told myself you'd figure it out. I was wrong to stay silent." She turned to my mother. "You gave up your career for motherhood. A valid choice. But then you tried to live through your younger daughter instead of supporting both children as they actually were." My mother cried silently. "And you," my grandmother said to my sister, "you've been a prisoner of favoritism. You've never developed real strength because you've always had their approval. That's not your fault. Children don't choose these dynamics. But you're an adult now. It's your responsibility to break free." The room was silent except for my mother's quiet sobs. "Natalie is pregnant with twins, my great-grandchildren, and I will not allow them to grow up in a family that repeats these patterns." She walked to her desk and pulled out a folder. "I've updated my will. Natalie and her children are now primary beneficiaries, not as punishment, but as protection. My father stood up abruptly. Mom, you don't need to. Sit down, he sat. This isn't about money. It's about accountability. If you want to be part of these children's lives, you will do the work. Real work, consistent therapy, changed behavior, showing up not just when it's convenient, but every time. She looked at each of them. You will not have access to Natalie or her children unless you prove, through sustained action, that you've changed. Months of therapy. Respecting Natalie's decisions. Understanding that trust is rebuilt slowly, if at all. How long? My sister asked, her voice small. As long as it takes, my grandmother said. This isn't a test with a finish line. This is fundamental change. And Natalie decides, at every step, whether your efforts are genuine. She placed her hand on my shoulder. I failed you by staying quiet. I won't fail your children. They will know family is built on consistent love, not conditional approval. My mother spoke, her voice broken. We love her. We love Natalie. We just didn't know how to show it. Then learn, my grandmother said simply. Love is a verb. It requires action. Can I say something? I asked quietly. My grandmother nodded. I looked at my parents and sister. I want you in my life. I want you to know your grandchildren. But I can't keep being the one who adapts, who forgives, who makes it easy for you to keep hurting me. If you want back in, you have to do the work. And I get to decide if the work is enough. My father was crying now too. We'll do whatever it takes. Then start by actually doing it, I said. Not grand gestures, not expensive gifts, just consistent, boring showing up. For months, for years. However long it takes for me to trust you won't disappear the next time I'm not convenient. My grandmother squeezed my shoulder. Meeting adjourned. Everyone out except Natalie. They left quietly, separately. My grandmother and I sat in silence. Thank you, I finally said. I should have done it decades ago, but at least I'm doing it now. At least your babies will grow up protected. I touched my stomach, feeling the flutter of movement. Protected. They would be protected. The nightmares started a week after the family meeting. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., heart racing, convinced I'd made a terrible mistake. In the dreams, my children were grown, asking why they never got to know their grandparents. You took that choice from us, dream daughter would say. I'd wake up gasping, reaching for my phone to call my parents and take it all back. Then I'd remember why I'd set the boundaries, and the guilt would twist into something more complicated. Was I being cruel? Taking away their grandchildren as punishment? Would my kids resent me someday? My therapist's office became my refuge. Twice a week, I'd sit on her couch and try to untangle the emotions. Tell me about the guilt, she'd say. I feel like I'm doing to them what they did to me, excluding them. Is that what you're doing? I'd think about it. No, I'm protecting myself, protecting my children. But it still feels cruel. Protection and punishment can look similar from the outside, she'd say. But they come from different places. Are you cutting them off to hurt them, or to keep yourself safe? Safe, I'd whisper. But what if I'm wrong? What evidence would you need to believe they've changed? That was the question keeping me up at night. What would be enough? 3 months of therapy? 6? How many times would they need to show up before I could trust they wouldn't disappear again? My best friend found me crying over baby clothes one evening. What's wrong? I bought 2 sets of everything, I said, holding up tiny socks. One to wear, one to save. But what if they ask about their grandparents? What if they want to know why there aren't more people in their baby photos? So you'll tell them the truth. What truth? That I was hurt and kept them away? That sounds vindictive. She took the socks from my hands. The truth is that you set boundaries to protect your kids from a pattern of conditional love. You left the door open for change but required evidence first. That's not vindictive, that's wisdom. But wisdom felt lonely. Sitting in my apartment at night, feeling the baby's kick, knowing that in another reality I'd be calling my mom about every flutter. Instead, I called my grandmother. They're moving a lot today, I'd tell her. Good, strong babies, just like their mother. The updates came through my grandmother. My parents were in therapy, individually and as a couple. My sister had gotten a job and moved into her own apartment. They were trying. They were changing. But were they changing for me? Or because the social consequences were too severe? How could I tell the difference? You might never know for sure, my therapist said. Change motivated by shame can become genuine growth, but you don't owe them the benefit of the doubt until they've earned it. My uncle called one afternoon. Your dad wanted you to know he's been volunteering at a legal aid clinic. He didn't want you to think he was doing it for points. My father, who'd dismissed my work as not real law, was volunteering at legal aid. Was it genuine? Performative? Did it matter if it helped people? I don't know how to trust them again, I told my grandmother one night. My feet were propped on her ottoman, swollen and aching. Trust isn't all or nothing, she said. You can trust them with small things and see how they handle it. Trust gets rebuilt in pieces, not all at once. But what if they resent me? What if this ruins our relationship permanently? Sweetheart, the relationship was already ruined. You're not breaking something whole. You're deciding whether to try rebuilding something broken, and you get to set the terms. I touched my belly, feeling one baby kick while the other slept. Two tiny humans who would depend on me to make the right choices. What if I'm being too harsh? What if my hurt is making me rigid? My grandmother was quiet. There's a difference between rigidity and standards. Rigid is saying, you can never come back. Standards is saying, you can come back when you've shown consistent change. You've set standards, not barriers. Then why does it feel so bad? Because you love them, she said simply. And love complicates everything. It makes us want to forgive before forgiveness is earned. But love also means protecting the most vulnerable. And right now, that's these babies. Your job is to protect them, even if it means being the bad guy in someone else's story. I nodded, tears sliding down my face. The babies kicked again, both of them this time. They're going to be okay, my grandmother said. Even if your parents never fully come back, even if this family never heals completely, these babies will have you and me and an extended family that shows up. That's enough. I wanted to believe her. Most days I almost did. 3 months into the separation, real consequences emerged in ways my parents couldn't ignore. My father lost a major client. The CEO had seen the viral video, connected the dots, and quietly moved their business elsewhere. My uncle told me over coffee. He's not handling it well, my uncle said. He keeps saying it's not fair that his professional life shouldn't be affected by personal mistakes. But it is affected, I said, stirring my decaf. I was 7 months pregnant now, carrying every ounce of the twins. My mother's social circle shrank too. Country club friends stopped inviting her to events. The lunch dates dried up. One cousin overheard a conversation at a charity gala about how some people don't deserve to be mothers. My grandmother reported all of this with a neutral expression. Just facts. How's my sister? I asked. Struggling. The job is demanding. She had a breakdown last week when her boss criticized her work. She's not used to being told she's not good enough. I felt a complicated twist in my chest. Part satisfaction. Finally, she was experiencing what I'd felt, but also sadness that we'd all had to break before thinking about healing. My parents tried, in their way. My father sent weekly flower arrangements with cards saying, "Thinking of you and the babies." My mother sent gift baskets, baby items, pregnancy books. My sister wrote long emails about therapy progress, job struggles, building a life independent of their approval. But I'd asked for consistency, not gifts. Real change, not performances. After 2 months of gestures, I asked my grandmother to tell them to stop. They're trying, she said gently. They're shopping their way out of discomfort. That's not the same. The gifts stopped. For a week, nothing. No contact, no messages. I wondered if they'd given up. Then my uncle called. Your father asked if he could come to one of your prenatal appointments. Not to talk to you, just to sit in the waiting room. To be nearby. He wanted me to ask because he was afraid you'd say no. I thought about it for 3 days. My therapist and I spent an entire session discussing it. What do you want? She asked. I want him to have cared before it was almost too late. But he didn't, so what do you want now? Finally, I want to see if he can follow a simple boundary. Sit in a waiting room without making it about him. I said yes, with conditions. He could come. He could sit in the waiting room. He could not approach me, speak to me, or make demands. If he violated any boundary, he'd leave and the trial period would end. The day of the appointment, I arrived early with my grandmother. My father was already there, sitting in the far corner, reading a magazine. He looked up, eyes filling with tears. But he didn't move. He just nodded once and went back to his magazine. I checked in, sat down, waited. My grandmother held my hand. My father stayed in his corner. When my name was called, I waddled toward the exam room. As I passed, our eyes met for a second. He mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." I didn't respond, but I didn't tell him to leave either. After the appointment, babies healthy and enormous, I came out to find him still there. Over an hour of waiting. When he saw me, he stood, then stopped himself from approaching. He picked up his coat, nodded once, and left. Such a small thing. sitting in a waiting room, following boundaries, not making demands. But it was the first time he'd done exactly what I'd asked without making it about his feelings. My grandmother squeezed my hand. That was hard for him? Good, I said, but my voice was softer than expected. 2 weeks later, my mother asked to do the same. Same conditions, same boundaries. She came, sat quietly, didn't approach. When I came out, she was crying silently, tissues balled in her hands. But she didn't make a scene. She just left. My sister sent an email asking if she could send something she'd made herself, not bought. A baby blanket she'd been learning to knit. I've had to restart it 4 times, I'm terrible at it. But I wanted to make something with my own hands. Something that required effort. You don't have to keep it. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to learn how to do hard things. The blanket arrived a week later, lumpy and uneven, with dropped stitches, also clearly made with painstaking effort. I cried when I pulled it out of the box. These weren't grand gestures or dramatic reconciliations. They were small, awkward attempts at respecting boundaries and putting in effort. I didn't know if it was enough. I didn't know if it would last. But it was different than before. And different was a start. The twins arrived 3 weeks early on a Tuesday morning. My water broke while reviewing a brief at my desk. My grandmother drove me to the hospital while my hands shook too much to hold my phone. Call the family, I managed between contractions. Which family? She asked carefully. All of them. They should know. The labor was long, 18 hours of contractions and exhaustion. My grandmother stayed the whole time, holding my hand, telling me I was doing great even when I was certain I was dying. My aunt and uncle arrived around hour 6. My cousins during hour 10. The waiting room filled with extended family who'd shown up at the ceremony, who'd called and visited throughout the pregnancy. My parents and sister arrived separately around hour 12. My grandmother went out to speak with them. They're asking if they can see her, she reported back. I told them that was up to you. I was too exhausted to think straight. Not yet. After the babies are born. Maybe. At 2 a.m, my daughter was born. 3 minutes later, my son followed. Small but healthy, crying loudly, perfect in every impossible way. When the nurse placed them in my arms, one on each side, I understood why my grandmother had fought so hard. These tiny humans were mine to protect, mine to keep safe from anything that could hurt them, even from their own grandparents. The extended family came in first, in small groups. They held the babies, took pictures, cried happy tears. My aunt whispered that my parents were still waiting, 14 hours now. Do you want to see them? She asked gently. I looked at my children, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the complicated dynamics surrounding them. Yes, but separately, one at a time, only a few minutes. My father came in first. He stood in the doorway, staring at the babies, tears streaming down his face. He'd aged in 6 months, more gray hair, deeper lines. Natalie, he said, voice breaking, they're beautiful. You can come closer, but don't touch them yet. He approached slowly, looked down at the sleeping twins, tears falling faster. I'm so sorry. For everything. For missing so much. For failing you. I didn't respond. Just watched him look at his grandchildren. I know I have to earn my way back, he said. I'm in therapy twice a week, volunteering at the legal aid clinic, trying to understand why I became the kind of father who could miss his daughter's biggest moments. That's good. But it's only been 6 months. I need to see consistency over years. He nodded, wiping his eyes. Whatever it takes. However long. I let him stay 5 more minutes before asking him to leave. My mother came in next, hands shaking, face swollen from crying. Oh, Natalie. They're perfect. You can look, but don't touch. She nodded, moved closer, stared at them, then looked at me. I've started therapy too, twice a week. We're working on why I projected onto your sister. Why I couldn't see you for who you were. That's what your therapist says. What do you say? I say she's right. I was a terrible mother to you. I'm ashamed and determined to be better. They deserve better. You deserved better. I let her stay a bit longer, then asked her to leave. My sister came in last, looking exhausted and anxious. Hi, she said softly. Hi. She approached carefully. They're so small. 6 pounds each. I made them something else. She pulled out a package. Matching hats. Not perfect, but I made them. I unwrapped them. 2 tiny knitted hats, uneven, but made with obvious care. Thank you. I got the job at the nonprofit that helps displaced families. Working there for 2 months. I thought you should know. I looked at her. Why that job? Because I wanted to understand what you do, why it matters. I met a mother last week who cried because we helped her keep her apartment. She said we saved her family, and I thought about you doing that every day. And now you understand? I'm starting to. About privilege. About what I've taken for granted. About who I could be if I actually tried. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. I know I can't undo the past, but I'm trying to be someone these babies wouldn't be ashamed to know. I felt tears sliding down my face. That's going to take time. I know. I'm ready. After she left, I was alone with my babies and grandmother. The room was quiet except for their soft breathing. You did well, my grandmother said. Did I? Letting them see the babies? Was that a mistake? No. It was a boundary. They met their grandchildren on your terms, with your conditions. That's how trust rebuilds. Carefully, slowly, with clear expectations. I touched each baby's tiny hand. What now? Now they prove themselves. Monthly supervised visits, continued therapy, respect for your decisions. If they can do that consistently, then maybe in a year or two, things can grow. And if they can't, then these babies will grow up surrounded by the family who showed up. They'll be loved. They'll be fine. I nodded, exhausted and cautiously hopeful. My parents had hurt me deeply, but they were trying. The question was whether trying would turn into being. Only time would tell. 2 years passed in the way time does with young children, simultaneously crawling and flying. My twins were now toddlers with opinions and personalities and an alarming ability to climb everything. My parents had kept their promises. Therapy every week, monthly supervised visits that became every other week after the first year, showing up to small moments, first steps, first words, birthdays. They followed every boundary, never pushed for more than I was willing to give. But distance remained, a formality that hadn't existed before. The twins called my grandmother Grandma. She babysat every Tuesday, knew their favorite songs, was the one they ran to for comfort. My parents were Linda and Robert. Names, not titles. I'd never explicitly told the twins to call them that. It just happened when you're not really someone's grandparent in function, only biology. My father noticed. I saw the way his face fell every time my son toddled past him calling Grandma to my grandmother. But he never complained. Never demanded. Just kept showing up, kept being respectful. My mother had gone back to school for social work. I want to understand people better, she'd told me during one visit. I want to be able to help, the way you help people. She volunteered at a women's shelter now. 18 months consistently, long past the point where anyone was watching. My sister had perhaps changed most dramatically. She'd kept the nonprofit job, got promoted, started dating someone who worked in sustainable housing. She sent the twins birthday cards she made herself, crafted with obvious effort and questionable artistic skill. But our bond remained fragile. We were cordial. We could talk about work or weather. We saw each other at family events. But we weren't really sisters. We were two people who shared DNA and a complicated past, trying to build something from ruins while knowing some things might stay broken forever. Do you think you'll ever forgive them? My best friend asked while our kids played at the park. I watched my twins on the slide, my grandmother on a nearby bench, my parents standing at a respectful distance. I don't know if it's about forgiveness, I said. It's about acceptance. Accepting that they hurt me. Accepting that they're trying. Accepting that effort doesn't erase harm, but it also matters. Do the kids notice the distance? Not yet. They're too young. But they will eventually. My father had started a foundation funding legal aid organizations. He'd named it after me, the Natalie Foundation. I'd asked him not to, but he'd done it anyway. One of the few times he'd pushed back. I need people to know my daughter taught me what really matters, he'd said when I confronted him. It felt complicated. Genuine effort, yes, but also absolution he hadn't fully earned. Everything felt complicated these days. My mother had asked carefully if she could take the twins to the aquarium, with me present, but letting her lead. I'd said yes, watched her fumble through the outing nervously, checking constantly, making sure she was doing everything right. She was trying so hard it was almost painful to watch. Afterward, my daughter had held my mother's hand walking to the car, just reached up and took it naturally. My mother's eyes filled with tears. That was good, my grandmother said later. You're letting them build something. Am I? Or am I setting them up for disappointment if my parents revert? You're giving them a chance. That's all you can do. The relationship with my sister was perhaps hardest to navigate. She'd sent me a long letter on my birthday. Handwritten, 10 pages, acknowledging every privilege, every time she'd been chosen while I'd been overlooked. Not asking for forgiveness, just acknowledging. I'd cried reading it. Then I'd put it in a drawer. I didn't know what to do with her accountability except hold it and recognize it existed. "I know we're not really sisters anymore," she'd said during one family dinner. "I know I can't fix what I took from you, but I want you to know I see it now. All of it. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life being different." "Okay," I'd said. Because what else was there? At the twins' second birthday party, my parents arrived with thoughtful presents, books they'd carefully chosen based on what the twins actually liked. They stayed, helped clean up, left without drama. It was normal, boring, unglamorous. It was also so much better than what had come before. But it wasn't healed. It wasn't whole. It was just different. As I tucked my children into bed that night, reading stories while my grandmother cleaned up and my parents drove home, I realized this was probably as good as it would get. Not a fairy tale reconciliation. Not a perfect family reunion. Just people trying their best, respecting boundaries, showing up consistently. It wasn't everything I'd wanted, but maybe it was enough. The twins turned 3 on a Sunday in March. We'd rented the community room at my grandmother's retirement complex. She'd moved there 6 months ago when the stairs became too much. She was frailer now, but her mind was sharp. The room was packed. My aunt and uncle who'd shown up at the ceremony, my cousins and their children, the extended family who'd filled that waiting room, my best friend, colleagues who'd become friends. And in the corner, keeping respectful distance, my parents and sister. 3 years since that group chat. 3 years of therapy, boundaries, supervised visits, and slow reconstruction. The dynamic had settled into something stable, if not warm. My parents came to birthdays and holidays, sent cards, respected every boundary. They never asked for more than I offered. But the twins still called them Linda and Robert. Still ran first to my grandmother. Still didn't quite understand why these peripheral adults were at events, but not really part of daily life. My daughter was blowing out candles when I caught my father's expression, watching with tears, standing at celebration's edge, close enough to witness, not close enough to intrude. It would have been easy to feel sorry for him, to soften boundaries. But I remembered being 12, winning that science fair, my mother talking about my sister's dance recital instead. I remembered my graduation, my first big case, the hospital, all the times I'd needed them and they'd chosen elsewhere. They were here now, but now didn't erase then. After most guests left, my mother approached carefully. "They're wonderful children. You're doing an amazing job. Thank you. I know things aren't what they could be, but I'm grateful for what we have, for being allowed to be here, even at the edges." She'd changed. Genuinely. She volunteered weekly, went back to school, showed up consistently. But change didn't erase damage. "I appreciate that," I said. "Do you think someday the twins might call us Grandma and Grandpa?" The question she'd held back for 3 years. "I don't know. That's up to them. When they're old enough to understand the history, maybe, or maybe not. I'm not forcing it." She nodded, eyes filling. "That's fair." My sister was sitting with my grandmother. I joined them. "I got engaged last month," my sister said. "I wanted to tell you in person." I felt complicated emotions. Happy for her, genuinely, but aware we'd never have the sister relationship we should have had. "Congratulations. You don't have to come to the wedding. I'll come. We're family. Complicated, but family." My grandmother squeezed my hand, conserving energy. "Proud of you. You protected them. You broke the cycle." Did I? It feels messy and incomplete. Because real life is messy. But look at them. She gestured to the twins building with blocks. They're confident, secure. They know they're loved unconditionally. You gave them that. I watched my children, these small humans who'd changed everything. "What happens if you're not here?" I asked quietly. "Then you keep doing what you're doing. Keep those boundaries, keep protecting these babies. Remember that family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up consistently, who choose you over and over." The twins ran over, demanding a story. My grandmother pulled them onto her lap. My parents watched from across the room, not invited into this intimate moment, not quite excluded, but not quite included. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined. No tearful reunion, no perfect forgiveness. My relationship with my parents remained formal. My sister and I were cordial but distant. But my children were thriving, loved completely, never conditionally. They'd never be the disappointing child, the overlooked one. That was the victory. Not punishing my parents forever, but creating something new. A family built on choice and consistency instead of obligation and favoritism. Later, driving home with sleeping twins in car seats, I thought about breaking the cycle. I'd paid a price. The loss of the family I'd wanted, the distance, the knowledge that some things were permanently broken, but I'd gained integrity, boundaries, self-respect, and children who would never doubt their worth. The twins grew up knowing Linda and Robert were people who'd made mistakes and were working to do better. They called my grandmother Grandma until she passed peacefully when they were 7, surrounded by family who genuinely loved her. They understood eventually that family is complicated, but consistency matters more than perfection. My parents remained peripheral but present. My sister and I developed cordial friendship, not sisterhood, but something honest. The extended family remained the core, the safe haven. My father's foundation continued funding legal aid work. My mother kept volunteering at the shelter. My sister married and eventually had children of her own, breaking cycles in her own way. The twins grew into confident children who never questioned their worth. And me? I continued my work, continued protecting families, continued building the life I'd fought for. Not perfect, not what I'd once dreamed, but real, honest, and mine. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real, and real was enough. During dinner, my sister said she was pregnant and that the father is my husband. But then I revealed a secret. You know when you think you know the people closest to you? When you believe that? No matter what problems exist, certain lines would never be crossed? Well, I thought so too. My name is Marina, I'm 29 years old, and this is the story of how I discovered that some people are capable of anything to get what they want. It was a Thursday in March when I received news of my promotion. After 4 years working as a project manager at a tech company in Austin, Texas, I would finally be commercial director. I couldn't stop smiling at the office. I called David, my husband, and Beatrice, my younger sister, to share the joy. Let's celebrate at Terrazzo tonight, I suggested. Terrazzo was that chic Italian restaurant downtown, where a meal cost more than minimum wage, but I could afford it. I worked hard for this. I arrived at the restaurant first, wearing that navy blue dress that David always said looked perfect on me. I chose a table in a more secluded corner. I wanted privacy to celebrate. The dining room was full of executives and elegant couples, the kind of environment where I felt comfortable after years building my career. When I saw them arriving together, I found it strange. Beatrice was radiant, with a smile I hadn't seen in a long time, and David seemed nervous. He always got a bit uncomfortable in expensive places, but there was something different that night, a tension in the air that I couldn't identify. Congratulations on the promotion, Mari! Beatrice hugged me with suspicious effusiveness. She was never very demonstrative with affection, especially with me. We ordered a $200 bottle of Chianti, and I started telling them about the new projects I would lead, the 40% salary increase, the possibilities for international growth. Beatrice listened with too much attention. David kept fidgeting with his napkin. Actually, Beatrice interrupted in the middle of my excitement, we also have news to share. She took David's hand across the table, and my stomach knotted inexplicably. I'm pregnant. The world stopped. Literally stopped. The restaurant voices became a distant buzz. The lights seemed to flicker, and I stared at my sister's hand intertwined with my husband's, as if it were a mirage. Pregnant. Beatrice was pregnant with David's child. I know it's a complicated situation. David spoke for the first time since they arrived, his voice coming out hoarse. But it happened, and we fell in love. They watched me with a mixture of expectation and poorly disguised satisfaction. It was as if they were waiting for me to explode, scream, make a scene that would give the other tables something interesting to talk about later. But I couldn't do anything but stare. My sister, Beatrice, whom I helped pay for college when our parents couldn't, was there holding my husband's hand, pregnant with his child, telling me this on the day of my promotion. How long? I managed to ask, my voice coming out strangely calm. 3 months, Beatrice replied, running her hand over her still imperceptible belly. It started right after your birthday. My birthday had been in December. It was May. 3 months of betrayal, 3 months of lies, 3 months of them laughing at me while I worked 12 hours a day to get this promotion I so wanted to share with the people I loved. Marina, say something, David asked. And for the first time in years, I really looked at him, really paid attention to the man I had been married to for 4 years. He looked relieved, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders, as if this was liberating for him. What do you want me to say? I asked, still in that strange voice that didn't sound like mine. Congratulations? Beatrice laughed, a nervous laugh, but genuine. Look, Mari, I know it's not easy, but these things happen. Love is love, right? And the baby, she ran her hand over her belly again. The baby needs both parents together. I picked up my purse slowly, left two $50 bills on the table, more than enough to cover my part of the bill, and stood up. I'm going home. You do whatever you want. As I walked toward the exit, I heard David calling my name, but I didn't turn around. In the wall mirror of the restaurant, I could see their reflections still sitting at the table. Beatrice was smiling. Throughout childhood, Beatrice lived in my shadow, and this irritated her deeply. I was the older daughter, the responsible one, the one who got good grades without having to try very hard. She was the youngest, the spoiled one, the one our parents protected from everything. But for some reason, this was never enough for her. We grew up in a middle-class family in San Antonio. Our father worked as an accountant at an oil company. Our mother was an elementary school teacher. We weren't rich, but we didn't lack anything either. Even so, Beatrice always had the impression that she deserved more. When I got a full scholarship to study business administration at the University of Texas, Beatrice made sure to say it was rich girl's luck. When I graduated with honors and got an internship at a multinational in Austin, she commented that I always knew how to sell myself. When I bought my first apartment at 25, she asked if I wasn't being too ambitious. The worst part is that she really believed she deserved the same things I had, but without the effort. As if success was a matter of luck or favoritism, not hard work and sacrifice. Beatrice studied graphic design at a public university, graduated without much distinction, and since then jumped from job to job, always complaining that bosses didn't recognize her potential. Our parents always tried to balance things out. When I bought my new Honda Civic, they bought a used one for her too. When I started earning well, they increased the help they gave her to pay rent for a small apartment in downtown San Antonio. It was as if they were trying to compensate for my success by keeping Beatrice at the same level, artificially. She always asked about my salary, my investments, the apartment's value. Just sisterly curiosity, she'd say. But there was an intensity in the way she asked that bothered me. Now I understood it wasn't curiosity. It was pure envy, mixed with greed that I refused to see. When I met David at a work party 5 years ago, Beatrice made sure to say he wasn't my type. He was handsome, nice, worked as a salesman at a BMW dealership. He earned reasonably well by Texas standards, about $5,000 a month with commissions, but nothing compared to my $8,000 salary that soon became $12,000. Still, I fell in love. He was fun, affectionate, made me laugh after stressful days at the office. David had a simplicity that attracted me, an uncomplicated way of seeing life that contrasted with my nature of always planning 3 steps ahead. Beatrice was always polite with David, but I noticed a certain tension, especially when we all went out together and the bill arrived. David sometimes felt embarrassed when I paid for restaurants that cost $100 per person, or when we bought concert tickets that cost $200 each. Beatrice observed all this with that calculating look I knew well, but preferred to ignore. "You support him, don't you?" she asked once, when David went to the bathroom during a family lunch at Olive Garden. "I don't support him," I replied, irritated. "We split things proportionally to our income." It was true. David paid the bills he could, groceries, gas, some household bills, and I covered the rest. It worked for us. But for Beatrice, that was more proof that I had too much luck. A brilliant career, a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in Austin, a dedicated husband, investments that grew month by month, as if I hadn't fought for every achievement, as if everything had fallen from the sky. I got home, and the apartment was exactly as I had left it that morning. Made bed, dishes washed, everything in place. It was strange how life could completely fall apart, and things could remain exactly the same. David's toothbrush was still there in the bathroom, his clothes in the closet, that ridiculous Dallas Cowboys mug he'd gotten in a dealership promotion. I sat on the beige leather sofa in the living room, still in my dress and high heels, and stared into the void. My head was strangely quiet, as if my brain had shut down the emotion processing system. I knew I should be crying, screaming, breaking things, but all I felt was a kind of numbness, like when you hit your elbow and can't feel your arm for a few minutes. David didn't come home that night, obviously. At 2 a.m, I received a message. "I'm at B's house. We'll talk tomorrow. B." He called my sister B, as if they'd been intimate for years, as if I didn't exist, as if our 4 years of marriage were just an inconvenient obstacle that had finally been removed. I spent the night awake, walking through the 120 square meters of the apartment, trying to understand how I had gotten there. How hadn't I noticed the signs? Were there signs? David working later in recent weeks. Beatrice asking about my schedule whenever she called. both of them arriving together at the restaurant as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Now that I thought about it, Beatrice had appeared a lot in Austin in recent months. "I came to see some clients," she'd say. Beatrice worked as a freelance graphic designer, so it was plausible that she had projects in the city. But Austin was only an hour and a half from San Antonio. Why did she always stay in hotels? Why didn't she ever ask to sleep on my couch like she used to? When the sun rose, I was still on the couch, with my dress wrinkled and makeup smeared. My iPhone showed 17 missed calls from my mother. Beatrice had told her everything, probably in a romanticized version where they were two lovers who couldn't resist the cruel fate that made them meet through me. I called the office and said I wouldn't be going to work. Simone, my assistant, noticed something was wrong from the tone of my voice but didn't insist. "Call me if you need anything, Marina. You never miss work. It must be something important." She was one of the few people I could trust completely. I went to take a shower, trying to wash away the sticky feeling from that night. Under the hot water, I finally cried. Not dramatic movie tears, but that tired crying of someone who had just lost two important people at once. My sister and my husband, the two I loved most in the world, had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. When I got out of the shower, I had 3 messages from Beatrice. "Mari, we need to talk. It wasn't how we wanted you to find out. Call me, please. I know it's difficult, but we can resolve this like adults." I deleted them all without responding. For the first time in years, I spent the entire day doing absolutely nothing productive. I watched Netflix, ordered Chinese food that cost $40 and arrived cold, ignored the phone that rang every 2 hours. It was as if I needed a whole day to process the fact that my life had completely changed overnight. That evening, David showed up to get some clothes. He still had the keys, still felt entitled to enter the apartment I had bought alone as if nothing had happened. He tried to talk, explain, justify himself while packing a suitcase with his things. "It wasn't planned, Mari. It just happened." As if betrayal were a meteorological accident, something beyond human control. B was going through a difficult time, needed someone to talk to. "How long have you been together?" I asked, watching him fold the polo shirts I had bought for him at Nordstrom. "Officially? Since January. 4 months. 4 months of lies, fake kisses, empty I love yous before sleep. While I worked 60 hours a week to get the promotion, dreaming of our future together, he was building a new life with my sister. "I'm going to find a lawyer," I warned, sitting on the king-size bed I had bought the year before. David stopped packing his suitcase and looked at me for the first time since he arrived. "Mari, it doesn't have to be like this. We can resolve everything among ourselves civilly. Divide things fairly without complications." Civilly, divide things fairly. As if betrayal were an issue that could be resolved with politeness and goodwill. As if he had any right to what I had built. After he left taking 2 suitcases and promising to come back on the weekend to get the rest, I called Helena, my best friend since college and a family law attorney in Houston. I told her everything, trying to keep my voice steady. Helena listened to me in silence and when I finished, sighed deeply. "Marina, I'm so sorry. I know how much you loved him and trusted your sister." She paused. "About the divorce, I need you to bring all the marriage documents, bank statements, deeds, proof of income, investments, everything. I'll put together the best case possible for you." "Helena, I don't care about the money. I just want this to end quickly." "Don't say that, Marina. You fought hard to build what you have. You're not going to hand it over to someone who betrayed you. Do you have any idea how much your assets are worth today?" I didn't have an exact idea, but I knew it was substantial. The apartment was worth at least $400,000. I had about $100,000 in investments, a stake in a startup worth at least $50,000, plus the new salary of $16,000 monthly. I scheduled the meeting for the following week and hung up. That's when I remembered. I needed to organize all the important documents. It wasn't something I did regularly. Who thinks about divorce when they're happy in marriage? I went to the office I had set up in the 2nd bedroom of the apartment, where I kept everything organized in colored folders like a person obsessed with control. Bank statements from the last 2 years, tax returns, investment statements from Fidelity and Charles Schwab. It was impressive to see on paper everything I had achieved at 29. I was proud of what I had built, but now everything seemed so fragile, as if it could disappear because of a betrayal and a poorly conducted divorce process. I took the green folder where I kept the marriage documents. Birth certificate, marriage certificate from Travis County, contract for... I stopped with the marriage certificate in my hand, frowning. There was something written there about property regime that suddenly caught my attention. Separate property regime. Complete separation of assets. Why complete separation? Most couples in Texas chose community property, partial community of assets. That's when I remembered, vaguely, like a memory that was stored in a dusty drawer of my brain. Prenuptial agreement. I had insisted on making a prenuptial agreement 4 years ago. I ran to the small safe I had installed in the bedroom closet. It had been so long since I'd opened it that I almost forgot the combination. My birthday inverted. Inside, between the apartment deed and my passport, there it was. A sealed envelope with the seals of the Travis County Clerk's office. Prenuptial agreement. Marina Santos Silva and David Oliveira Ferreira. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. I vaguely remembered insisting on this at the time, but the details were hazy. It had been 4 years ago. I was so in love and happy that the legal aspects of marriage seemed just a necessary formality to officialize our love. But now, alone in the bedroom at 2 a.m, holding those pages printed on letterhead from the law firm, I felt something I hadn't experienced in days. A hint of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't lose everything I had built. Maybe there was something in those papers that could protect me from my sister's greed and my husband's irresponsibility. I took a deep breath, turned on the bedside lamp, and began reading every word with the attention of someone deciphering their own future. The memory came back like a movie being rewound. It was a sunny Saturday in April, 2 weeks before our wedding. I was 25 and had just signed the purchase contract for my first apartment, a modern 2-bedroom loft in downtown Austin that cost $350,000. David was nervous about the ceremony preparations, complaining about costs that were getting out of control. "Mari, are you sure you need all this?" he said, looking at the vendor list spread on my kitchen table. $15,000 catering, $8,000 photographer, $12,000 decoration. It's a lot of money. A lot. It was a lot of money indeed, especially for him, who earned about $4,000 a month at the BMW dealership. For me, who had just received a substantial promotion and was earning $12,000 monthly, it was an investment in our special day. But I understood his concern. He had grown up in a family where every dollar was counted. "David, relax. I'll pay most of it. You contribute what you can. What's important is us being together, celebrating our love." It was in this context that I mentioned the prenuptial agreement. Not as mistrust, but as natural protection for someone who had significant assets. My lawyer at the time, Dr. Patricia Williams, had suggested it during the apartment purchase. "Marina, you're young, successful, and accumulating assets rapidly. A prenup is sensible, especially when there's significant difference in assets between spouses. It's not mistrust, it's intelligent protection." When I talked to David about this on a Tuesday night, he laughed. Literally laughed, almost spitting out the Shinerbach beer he was drinking. "Prenuptial? Isn't that rich people nonsense? We love each other, Mari. Love doesn't need papers to prove anything. These things are for couples who enter marriage already thinking about divorce. It's not about love, David. It's legal protection. For both of us. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong," he interrupted me, pulling my hand. "We're going to be happy forever. You're being paranoid, baby." He made a face like he didn't understand the necessity, but eventually agreed when I explained it was something that would make me more comfortable. "If it's important to you, fine. But honestly, I think you're complicating something that should be simple." We went to Dr. Williams's office on a Thursday morning. I remember David was hungover because he had gone out with his dealership colleagues the night before for the last bachelor's outing. He arrived 15 minutes late, somewhat sleepy, complaining that he had lost an important sale because of the appointment. "Sorry, Mari. Had to come straight from work. Johnson wanted to close a deal today, but I said I had an important appointment with you." Dr. Williams, an elegant 50-year-old woman with gray hair and impeccable suits, explained the basic terms with the patience of someone who had given that presentation hundreds of times. Complete separation of assets. Each spouse maintains their individual patrimony. No division in case of divorce except for assets acquired jointly with clear proof of mutual contribution. "It's important to understand," she said, looking mainly at David, "that this agreement protects both parties. If you acquire significant assets during the marriage, they will also be protected." "You understand, David?" I asked, observing his somewhat lost expression. Yes. Each one keeps what's theirs, right? Makes sense?" It made no sense at all that he had understood completely, because David never showed interest in complex legal or financial matters. When I tried to talk about investments or financial planning, he would change the subject or make jokes about me being too uptight with money, but he signed all the pages with the ease of someone signing a grocery list. 15 pages of dense legal text, Specific clauses about properties, investments, future businesses, inheritance. David barely read the section titles. There, now you can marry in peace, Dr. Williams said, smiling as she stamped and filed the copies. I hope to never see you here professionally again. On the way back, driving my Honda Civic through Austin streets, David commented, I still think this contract thing is kind of weird, but if it makes you calmer, what's important is that in 2 weeks we'll be married, husband and wife forever. He really didn't understand what he had signed. For David, that was just another necessary bureaucracy to officialize our love, like getting the marriage license or choosing the rings. He didn't comprehend that he was giving up any right to my present and future patrimony. And I, in love and confident that we would be happy forever, didn't mind his lack of attention to details. After all, love was more important than any paper, wasn't it? We were going to build a life together, share everything, be a modern and partnered couple. The contract was just a formality that would never be necessary. How wrong I was. Now, 4 years later, alone in the bedroom at 3 a.m. with the contract in my hands, I finally understood the value of that rich people nonsense. I read each page with redoubled attention, as if I were deciphering a secret code that could save my life. The legal words that at the time seemed just formality, now shone on the page like precious diamonds. Complete separation of property. Each spouse shall maintain individual ownership of all property owned prior to marriage and all property acquired during the marriage. Each spouse. Property acquired during marriage. The apartment I bought before getting married. The investments I made monthly. The stock applications. The stake in the tech startup I bought 2 years ago. All of this was exclusively mine. In the event of dissolution of marriage, there shall be no division of property, with each party retaining the entirety of their individual assets. Dissolution of marriage. There shall be no division of property. David had no right to anything, absolutely nothing of what I had built. I continued reading, looking for some clause that could complicate things, some loophole he could use to claim part of my patrimony, but there wasn't any. The contract was crystal clear, comprehensive, and bulletproof. Dr. Williams had done impeccable work. Spousal support waiver. Both parties hereby waive any right to spousal support, alimony, or maintenance from the other party. Alimony. David had no right even to alimony, and considering he earned much less than me, theoretically, he would be the one who could ask for financial support. For the first time in 3 days, I smiled. A small smile, but genuine. David had signed his own financial sentence 4 years ago, without even realizing it. And Beatrice... Oh, Beatrice... She had probably seduced my husband thinking he would be her gateway to a financially comfortable life. What delicious irony. I continued reading the specific clauses. Debt separation, each one responsible for their own. Future businesses. Corporate participation remained individual. Intellectual property, royalties and patents were not shared. Inheritance, assets received from family remained with the original recipient. It was complete armor. David had no right to a cent of what I had built, and more importantly, I had no responsibility for his debts. I remembered he had financed a Ford F-150 pickup the year before, plus had a high-limit credit card that he used frequently. I took my laptop and started making a mental list of my current patrimony. Apartment valued at least $400,000. Investments in stocks and funds totaling about $100,000. Stake in the startup I founded with 2 college colleagues worth at least $50,000 in the last contribution. Checking and savings account with $40,000. Paid-off car valued at $20,000. More than $600,000 in net worth at 29. And David had no right to any of it. Even better, my new salary as commercial director would be $16,000 monthly, plus performance-based bonuses that could reach $20,000 per month in the best quarters, while David would continue earning his $4,000 or $5,000 monthly selling cars. For the first time in days, I smiled. A small smile, but genuine. David had signed his own financial sentence 4 years ago without even realizing it. And Beatrice? Oh, Beatrice. She had probably seduced my husband thinking he would be her gateway to a financially comfortable life. What delicious irony. I remembered the conversation we had last Christmas, when she complained about the injustice of me having everything. Marie, do you realize how frustrating it is? Beautiful apartment, new car, trips, while I kill myself working and barely pay rent. Now I understood it wasn't frustration, it was planning. Beatrice had seen in David an opportunity to finally get what she deserved without working for it. She didn't love him. She loved what she thought he could give her access to. I stored the contract back in the safe, but first took photos of all pages with my iPhone. I sent the images to Helena by email with the subject, "Gift from God." She responded in 15 minutes, even though it was almost 4 in the morning. "Marina, this changes everything. Call me tomorrow." For the first time since that horrible dinner at Terrazzo, I managed to sleep a few hours. And for the first time in years, I dreamed about my future. A future where I was completely free to be whoever I wanted to be, without anyone trying to steal what I had built. I woke up the next morning with a mental clarity I hadn't felt in days. While having coffee in my modern kitchen, looking out the 10th floor window at the Austin skyline, I began connecting dots that before seemed like innocent coincidences. Beatrice had always shown suspicious interest in my financial life. It wasn't just fraternal curiosity. There was a calculating intensity in her questions that now made complete sense. "How much do you pay in rent for this apartment?" she had asked during a visit last year. When I explained it was financed, not rented, her eyes lit up. "Wow, it must be worth a fortune." She asked about my salary with uncommon frequency. "Mari, how much are you earning now?" "Just to situate myself in the market," she'd say, as if she were comparing with her own opportunities as a freelancer. When I mentioned I was investing in stocks, she wanted to know specific amounts. "I'm thinking about starting to invest too. I need a reference." I remembered a specific conversation during last year's Christmas. We were at our parents' house in San Antonio, and Beatrice had had a few too many glasses of wine. "Mari, do you realize how frustrating it is to see you having everything? Beautiful apartment, new car, trips, expensive clothes, while I kill myself working and can barely pay rent. Beatrice, you can have all this too. It's a matter of working hard and making smart choices," I replied, trying to be encouraging. "Oh, sure, everyone has the same opportunities, right? You were always the perfect daughter, the smart one, the one who gets everything easy. I have to kill myself to get crumbs." At the time, I thought it was just the wine talking. Now I realized it was envy and resentment accumulated over years. Beatrice genuinely believed she deserved what I had, but without the corresponding effort. And David, poor David. He was never an ambitious person financially. He was satisfied with his dealership salary, with his simple life of weekend beer and football on television. But I noticed how he sometimes looked at the things I bought with a mixture of admiration and discomfort. $400 for a purse, Mari? That's almost my rent," he commented when I bought a coach at Nordstrom. It wasn't criticism. It was more like he was trying to process a financial world completely different from his. Beatrice had probably planted seeds in his head. "Imagine when you two get divorced, David. Half of all this will be yours." She didn't know about the prenuptial agreement because I never told anyone in the family. It was a private matter between me and my husband. Now I understood the conversation I overheard by chance a few months ago. David was on the phone on the balcony and I thought it was work. But now I remembered hearing, "I don't know if it's the right time. She suspects something. I need to be sure." At the time, I thought he was talking about some complicated sale. Now I realized he was probably talking to Beatrice about how and when to reveal their relationship. The most painful part was realizing they had planned that moment at the restaurant. The choice of Terrazzo, on the day of my promotion, the way they arrived together, the poorly disguised satisfaction on their faces. It wasn't an impulse or a desperate confession. It was theater. They wanted to humiliate me publicly, catch me off guard, see me fall apart, and they probably expected me to react with desperation, begging David to come back, offering anything to save my marriage. Too bad they didn't know about the prenuptial agreement. I spent the weekend organizing my strategy. I called Helena early Monday morning, before even going to work. "Marina girl, this contract is a work of legal art. David has no right to absolutely anything. We can process the divorce in 60 days if he doesn't contest." "And if he contests? Based on what?" "He signed the prenup. Everything is registered. There are no vices of consent. Unless he proves coercion or fraud, which is impossible, he's screwed." Screwed? David was screwed and didn't even know it yet. "Helena, I want to do something. I'm going to call them and propose a civilized conversation about the divorce. I want to see their faces when they discover the truth. Marina, are you sure? It might be simpler to just file and be done with it." "I'm sure. They humiliated me in public. I want to return the favor." 3 weeks passed since that night at Terrazzo. 3 weeks in which David came to get the rest of his things from the apartment, always accompanied by Beatrice, as if he needed protection or moral support. 3 weeks in which my mother called daily trying to mediate the situation, as if betrayal were a misunderstanding that could be resolved with a frank conversation. "Marina, dear, I know you're hurt, but these things happen. David has always been a good boy and Beatrice is pregnant. Can't you think about the baby? Think about the baby. The baby that my sister was using as an excuse to steal my husband and, consequently, my patrimony. Mom, I won't discuss this. David and I are getting divorced, period. But Marina, you built a life together. The apartment, the plans. Ah, yes. The apartment. The plans. My mother also believed David had a right to half of everything. Beatrice had probably filled the whole family's heads with stories about how I was selfish and petty for not graciously accepting the betrayal. In the 4th week, I called Beatrice. She answered on the 2nd ring as if she were waiting for my call. Mari, so good that you called. We really need to talk. Hi, B. Look, I thought a lot about this whole situation, and I think you guys are right. There's no point in holding grudges. We're adults. These things happen. Silence on the other end of the line. She wasn't expecting this reaction. Really? You're okay with this? I'm trying to accept it. I mean, you fell in love, right? It wasn't anyone's fault. And now there's the baby to think about. Wow, Mari, you can't imagine how relieved I am hearing this. David was so worried, thinking you were going to make drama, complicate the divorce. How interesting. As if I were the complicated person in the story. Not at all. Can we meet to talk civilly about how to resolve everything? Without fights, just to settle things like adults. Maybe dinner again, but this time for closure, not for surprises? Beatrice laughed nervously. Of course, that would be great. David will be so happy. He was afraid you would, well, make a scene. No, imagine. Scene for what? Let's meet at Terrazzo again, since that's where it all started. Saturday night? Perfect. Mari, you can't imagine how important this is for us. Especially now, with the baby coming. I hung up the phone smiling. Saturday night would be interesting. Very interesting. I spent the following days preparing like an actress rehearsing for the performance of her life. I chose the outfit, an elegant black dress that conveyed seriousness and control. I practiced in the mirror the calm and resigned expression I wanted to maintain throughout the entire conversation. Helena thought the idea was risky. Marina, are you sure you want to do this? It might be more efficient to simply notify them through a lawyer. Helena, they humiliated me in public. They planned everything to see me fall apart in front of a restaurant full of people. They deserve the same treatment. And if they suspect something, they won't suspect. They're too busy planning how to spend my inheritance. I arrived at Terrazzo on Saturday punctually at 8 at night. I asked for the same table as last time. The maitre d' recognized me and made a comment about hoping tonight would be a happier night. If he only knew. David and Beatrice arrived together again, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. They were relaxed, smiling, holding hands like a couple in love who could finally show themselves in public. Beatrice wore a dress that highlighted her still small but noticeable belly. Mari! Beatrice hugged me with genuine effusiveness. You look beautiful. Is that dress new? Thank you. You both look well too. How's the pregnancy? Great. We're already thinking about names. David wants Michael if it's a boy. I prefer Gabriel. David pulled out the chair for Beatrice to sit, a chivalrous gesture he rarely made for me. Marina, thank you for agreeing to talk like this. Peacefully, I was afraid that I would make drama? Imagine, David. We're all adults here. We ordered the same bottle of Chianti as last time. The irony wasn't lost on any of us, but this time the atmosphere was one of disguised celebration. They thought they had won the grand prize. So, David said after the first sip, about the divorce, we wanted to propose doing everything amicably. Divide things fairly without complications. Divide things fairly, I repeated, savoring the words. Tell me more about this, David. What do you consider fair? Beatrice and David exchanged a quick glance. They had rehearsed this conversation. Well, we can sell the apartment and split it 50-50. The investments too. And now with your new promotion, alimony will help a lot until I can stabilize with B and the baby. Alimony. He really believed I would pay alimony to him while he raised a child with my sister. I slowly picked up my purse as if I were looking for something specific. David and Beatrice watched me expectantly, probably thinking I was going to take out some divorce documents for us to sign right there, in a friendly reconciliation that would benefit them immensely. Instead, I placed the courthouse envelope with the prenuptial agreement on the table. The paper yellowed by time made a dry sound when it hit the wood. Before we talk about division, I need to clarify something important that you seem to have forgotten. David frowned, looking at the envelope. What is that? Our prenuptial agreement, David. Remember? The one you signed 4 years ago, saying it was rich people nonsense? The color instantly drained from his face. Beatrice looked confused between the two of us. What agreement? You made a prenuptial agreement? We did. And David signed it without even reading it properly. I took the pages out of the envelope and placed them on the table, open so both could see. Complete separation of assets. Do you remember what that means? David picked up the pages with trembling hands. His eyes ran over the lines, trying to process words he clearly didn't understand completely 4 years ago. Calm down, Mari, Beatrice said, her voice losing its previous confidence. Even with an agreement, you were married. There's partial community property, division of assets acquired during marriage. Not when there's complete separation of assets, Beatrice. I pointed to the specific clause. It's here. Each spouse shall maintain individual ownership of all property owned prior to marriage and all property acquired during the marriage. Everything acquired during marriage also stays with whoever acquired it. But this can't be legal, David protested, his voice rising an octave. The apartment, the investments. I lived there. I contributed to expenses. You contributed $300 a month for groceries and gas, David. I paid the $1,800 for financing, the $200 for condo fees, internet, electricity, phone, insurance. Your $300 doesn't give you property rights over a $400,000 apartment. Beatrice frantically flipped through the pages, as if looking for some loophole, some salvation. But alimony. He has a right to alimony. I smiled for the first time that night. Page 5, Section 3. Spousal support waiver. Both parties hereby waive any right to spousal support. Alimony, or maintenance. David waived his right to alimony when he signed this. I didn't know what I was signing, David shouted, drawing attention from neighboring tables. You tricked me. I tricked you? David, you were there when the lawyer explained each clause. You said you understood. There are witnesses. Everything is registered at the courthouse. The expression on Beatrice's face was changing from confusion to horror. Reality was hitting like a runaway train. You mean he has no right to anything? Nothing. Zero. Zilch. I put the papers back in the envelope. David leaves the marriage exactly as he entered, with his financed pickup, his clothes, and his credit card debts. David ran his hand over his face, finally understanding the magnitude of the situation. Marina, for God's sake, we can talk about this. You can't leave me with nothing. I'm going to have a child to support. You are going to have a child to support, I emphasized, with your car salesman salary, which, by the way, with child support will be quite tight. Child support? Beatrice asked, her voice coming out as a whisper. Of course, the father has to pay child support. In Texas, it's usually 20% of net income for one child. If David earns $5,000 gross, about $3,800 net remains. 20% of that is $760 per month, forever, until the child turns 18. The two looked at each other in panic. They clearly hadn't done these calculations. Plus medical expenses, daycare when necessary, clothes, education. It's going to be quite expensive to have a baby, guys. David sank into his chair. My God, Marina, how can you be so cold? So calculating? Calculating? Me? You two planned this betrayal for months, humiliated me publicly in this same restaurant, and I'm the calculating one. Beatrice was clearly doing mental math. If David earned $5,000 a month and was going to pay $800 in support, $4,200 would remain, minus taxes, about $3,400 net, to support him, her, and a baby. Beatrice, how much do you earn as a freelancer again? I asked, knowing the answer well. It varies, about $2,000 a month when there are projects. About $2,000 when there are projects. So you'll live on $5,400 monthly at best, for 3 people. Living where? At my house in San Antonio, she murmured. That one-bedroom apartment you rent for $800? It's going to be cramped with a baby, don't you think? The silence at the table was deafening. Around us, other customers dined happily, oblivious to the financial drama unfolding just meters away. Marina, David tried once more. Are you really going to do this? Leave us with nothing? I know we hurt you, but, David, you didn't hurt me. You tried to rob me. You thought I was an emotional idiot who would hand over half of my $600,000 patrimony because you were in love. $600,000? Beatrice repeated, incredulous. Surprise! I'm richer than you imagined. And now, with the promotion, I'll earn $16,000 a month, while you fight over money for diapers. David buried his face in his hands. I'm an idiot. A complete idiot. Finally, something we agree on. Beatrice tried one last card. Mari, you're my sister. We've always been family. You can't abandon us like this. And your niece or nephew? Don't you want to help? Beatrice. You tried to steal my husband thinking you'd steal my fortune along with him. You calculated wrong. And now you'll have to live with the consequences of your choices. But family doesn't betray family. Family doesn't humiliate family in public restaurants. Family doesn't seduce their sister's husband out of greed. I got up from the table, leaving two $50 bills, again more than enough for my part. Your lawyers can contact mine, Helena Williams, in Houston. She has all the necessary information. Marina, wait. David stood up, trying to follow me. No, David, you waited. You waited 4 months to tell me the truth. You waited until the day of my promotion to maximize the humiliation. You waited until you thought you had everything planned perfectly. Now I'm going to make you wait. Wait for what? Beatrice asked, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Wait to see what it's like to be poor. What it's like to live counting pennies. What it's like not being able to pay for dinner at a $200 restaurant. I stopped at the door, looking back at both of them. Maybe now you'll understand why I work so hard to have what I have, and why I protect what's mine. I left Terrazzo hearing Beatrice start to cry and David cursing under his breath. In the parking lot, sitting in my car, I allowed myself a moment of pure satisfaction. They had tried to destroy me and ended up destroying themselves. My phone rang. It was Helena. So, how was the theater? Better than Broadway. You should have seen their faces when they understood they wouldn't get anything. Marina, you're diabolical, and I completely approve. Helena, can I file for divorce tomorrow? I can file the papers Monday. In 60 days, you'll be free, and they'll still be poor. I drove home smiling for the first time in weeks. Actually, smiling more than I had smiled in years. 6 months later, life had settled into a new normalcy that I had never imagined possible. The divorce was finalized in exactly 60 days. David didn't contest, probably because any competent lawyer would have explained that he didn't have the slightest chance of winning. Helena did impeccable work, and I officially became single on a sunny July morning. Through social media and my mother's inevitable comments, I followed from afar the reality that David and Beatrice were facing. It was like watching a car accident in slow motion. You know you should look away, but you can't. David continued working at the BMW dealership, but things weren't easy. With the unstable economy, luxury car sales had decreased, and his commission had plummeted along with it. According to my mother, he was earning about $3,500 a month, much less than the $5,000 he used to make. Marina, David is going through difficulties, my mother said during one of our weekly phone conversations. With the baby's support, very little is left for him to live on. What a shame, I replied, without a hint of genuine sympathy. But babies are expensive. He should have thought about that beforehand. Little Sophia had been born in September, a little girl who, from photos circulating in the family, had David's eyes and Beatrice's stubbornness. The $800 monthly child support was being automatically deducted from David's salary, leaving even less money for his own expenses. Beatrice had moved back to our parents' house in San Antonio. The one-bedroom apartment she rented was impossible for a couple with a baby, and even splitting bills, they couldn't afford anything bigger. Our parents, already retired and living on limited income, now supported 3 adults and a baby on my father's retirement. Beatrice is trying to get more clients, but it's difficult with the baby, my mother continued. And David? He seems so tired lately, working late, driving an hour and a half every day between Austin and San Antonio. David had tried to move to San Antonio to be closer to the family, but couldn't get a transfer at the dealership. Now he made the daily commute, spending a fortune on gas he could barely afford. He asked to talk to you, my mother said hesitantly. Maybe you could resolve some things. Mom, we have nothing to resolve. The divorce is finalized, he has a new family, let everyone follow their own life. It was true. I had followed my life spectacularly. With the divorce resolved and the betrayal overcome, my energy multiplied exponentially. I concentrated all my strength on my career and business, and the results exceeded my most optimistic expectations. As commercial director, I beat all first-quarter targets, securing the maximum bonus. My effective salary reached $22,000 a month in some periods. The startup I was a partner in secured new investment, tripling the value of my stake. In October, I found an even larger and more modern loft in downtown Austin. 2 floors, 3 bedrooms, private terrace with lake view. I sold my old apartment for $500,000, $80,000 profit in 5 years, and bought the loft in cash for $700,000. I renovated everything from scratch. German kitchen, complete automation, private gym, Office with panoramic view. I spent $200,000 on the renovation, but the result was an architectural work of art that became the cover of Austin Home and Design magazine. "Wow, Marina," said Simone, my assistant, when she came to see the new loft. "This looks like a movie house. You've achieved the American dream." It was true. At 30, I had a net worth of over $1 million, a solid career at an international company, and complete freedom to do whatever I wanted. I traveled to Europe 3 times that year. Paris, Rome, Barcelona, always alone, always first class, always staying at the best hotels. I bought clothes at boutiques I previously considered too expensive, dined at Michelin-starred restaurants, shopped without looking at prices. The loneliness? Curiously, I didn't feel it. After years of being betrayed by those I trusted most, the peace of being alone was almost addictive. I didn't need to explain my expenses to anyone, didn't need to consider others' opinions in my decisions, didn't need to share my space or my time. I started therapy, not for sadness, but for growth. Dr. Rebecca Chen, an incredible psychologist of Asian origin, helped me process not just the betrayal, but years of toxic relationships disguised as family love. "Marina, you grew up believing you had to take care of everyone around you," she said in one session. "Your sister, your parents, your ex-husband. When was the last time someone took care of you?" It was a simple question that made me cry for 15 minutes. I had always been the provider, the responsible one, the problem solver. I never stopped to think if anyone was taking care of me. "Maybe it's time for you to put yourself first," Dr. Chen suggested, "and discover who you are when you're not supporting other people." That's exactly what I did. During the holiday season, I received several messages from Beatrice. First reconciliation attempts, then direct requests for financial help. "Mari, I know you're upset, but we're sisters. Sophia is your niece. Can't you at least help with some baby things?" "Marina, expenses with Sophia are very high. Diapers, medicine, pediatrician. David is killing himself working but can't cover everything. Mari, for God's sake. Answer my messages. We need help, and you're the only person in the family who can afford it." I read them all without responding. I blocked the number after the 10th message. My mother tried to mediate. "Marina, whatever the hurt, the child is innocent. Don't you want to meet your niece?" "Mom, when Beatrice decided to seduce my husband, she made a choice. Now she's living with the consequences of that choice. It's not my responsibility to solve the financial problems they created. But you have so much money." "I have so much money because I worked hard to have it, and because I protected what I built. If Beatrice wanted financial stability for her child, she should have thought about that before getting pregnant by a man who earns $4,000 a month." It was harsh with my mother, but necessary. The whole family had gotten used to the idea that I was the personal emergency bank for any crisis. Not anymore. On my 30th birthday in December, I organized a party at the new loft. I invited work colleagues, college friends, some people I met traveling, 50 elegant people, French champagne, professional catering, live musician. Looking out my terrace window at the Austin lights, with a glass of Dom Perignon in my hand, and surrounded by people who genuinely enjoyed my company, I felt deep gratitude. Gratitude that David had betrayed me. Without the betrayal, I would never have discovered my own strength, never would have learned to set boundaries, never would have realized I could be completely happy alone. Gratitude for the prenuptial agreement that my younger self had the wisdom to make. Those papers saved me from years of legal battle and allowed me to start over immediately. Gratitude even for Beatrice. Without her envy and greed, I never would have learned that not all family deserves unconditional loyalty. Some people are toxic regardless of blood ties. The week after my birthday, I received one last contact attempt. Not from Beatrice or David, but from my father. "Marina, your mother didn't want me to call, but I need to talk to you. Things are very difficult here at home. David lost his job at the dealership last week. Year-end cuts." My father rarely interfered in family conflicts. When he called, it was because the situation was really critical. "And what do you want me to do, Dad?" "I don't know, daughter. I don't know what to do anymore. There are 4 people here at home, a small child, and now, without David's income. Your mother is talking about going back to work, but she's 70 years old." I felt a pang of guilt. Genuine, for the first time in months. My parents weren't to blame for the situation. They were just trying to help a daughter in difficulties as parents do. "Dad, I can help you, but I won't give money to David or Beatrice directly. If you need something specific, electric bill, groceries, pediatrician for Sophia, send me the bills and I'll pay them directly." "Marina, that's my offer. I'll help you, who are innocent in this story, but I won't finance the bad choices David and Beatrice made." My father accepted, relieved. In the following months, I received some bills by email: $200 electric bill, $300 groceries, $150 pediatric consultation. Trivial amounts for me, but they made a difference for them. I never had direct contact with David or Beatrice again. According to my father, David got a job at a smaller dealership, earning half what he used to earn. Beatrice continued doing sporadic freelance work, but with a small child, it was impossible to work full-time. They had moved to a trailer park in San Antonio. $500 monthly rent for a tiny space, but it was what they could afford. Sophia's support continued being automatically deducted, leaving even less money for them. They fight a lot about money, my father told me in a conversation. David blames Beatrice for insisting on the divorce. Beatrice blames him for losing his job. It's a cycle. It was exactly what I imagined would happen. When people get together for wrong reasons, greed, envy, opportunism, and financial reality knocks on the door. False love disappears quickly. 2 years after the betrayal, my life was completely transformed, not just financially, but emotionally. I learned to say no without guilt. I learned that self-esteem is non-negotiable. I learned that some people are incapable of genuinely loving. They can only see other people as resources to be exploited. I started dating Daniel, an architect I met at an art exhibition. He had his own successful company, his own resources, his own ambitions. Our relationship was based on real partnership, not financial or emotional dependence. "You have impressive strength," he told me one night, while we dined on my loft's terrace. "But also an inner peace that's rare." He was right. I had found a peace that came from knowing exactly who I was and what I deserved. I no longer needed anyone's approval, no longer needed to support people who didn't contribute to my life. Sophia turned 2 without me meeting her personally. From photos my mother insisted on showing on her phone, she was a beautiful and apparently healthy child. I felt a hint of curiosity about her, but not enough to reconnect with Beatrice and David. Some friends thought I was being cruel. "Marina, she's your niece. Don't you miss family?" "I have family," I would respond. "My parents, who love me unconditionally. My true friends, whom I've built over the years. Family isn't just blood. It's who really cares about your well-being." It was true. Simone, my assistant, was more present in my life than Beatrice ever was. Helena continued being a close friend and advisor. Dr. Chen helped me grow in ways I didn't even know I needed. On the 3rd anniversary of the betrayal, I received a message from an unknown number. It was David. "Marina, I know you don't want to talk to me, but I need to tell you something. You were right about everything. About me, about Beatrice, about the money. I was an idiot and destroyed the best thing I had in life. I hope you're happy." Reading that message didn't bring me satisfaction or anger, just a kind of peaceful closure. David had finally understood what he lost, but it was too late. I had moved on completely. I deleted the message without responding. Today, at 32, I look back and see how that horrible night at Terrazzo was actually the best gift life could have given me. It forced me to discover who I really was when I wasn't being exploited or underestimated. I'm now executive director of the company, with a salary of $300,000 annually. My net worth has exceeded $2 million. I travel the world regularly, both for work and pleasure. I have a healthy relationship with someone who values me and contributes equally to our partnership. More importantly, I learned that people who really love you don't try to steal your peace, your money, or your dignity. They celebrate your successes, respect your boundaries, and build together with you. David continues living in the trailer park, working jobs that pay little, fighting with Beatrice about money they don't have. Beatrice continues sending occasional messages asking for help, which I continue ignoring. Sophia is growing up in a family that struggles financially because of her parents' selfish choices. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel guilty for having so much while they have so little. But then I remember, they tried to rob me. They planned my humiliation. They calculated my emotional and financial destruction. The fact that they calculated wrong isn't my fault. I built everything I have with honest work, intelligent decisions, and adequate protection of my assets. They tried to take a shortcut through betrayal, and discovered that shortcuts often lead to dead ends. I learned that self-esteem and dignity are non-negotiable, that not all family deserves loyalty, that underestimated people can surprise in devastating ways, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, while those who tried to harm you reap the consequences of their own choices. My story isn't about revenge, it's about justice. It's about discovering that it's worth protecting what you build, and that not everyone deserves access to your life. And it's about learning that when you stop supporting people who only exploit you, Much more energy remains to build something truly extraordinary.